No, and actually, though, over time, I learned when I finally found out that I had courage was when I realized I was making the decision to get on that plane, that I wasn't stuck on there, and I was going to Boston to see my nephew, who was 5 years old and thought I was wonderful. So, but that kind of gave me an indication of what courage was about. And since that time, Chris and I have been studying courage. So why courage? Well, if you notice here, courage is the first, I don't know how to adjust that exactly. Courage is the first of the human qualities. And because it is a quality that guarantees everything else. And there is nothing I found that changes what that means. But everybody says that courage is what everything else is based on. Courage is the most important of all virtues because without it, we can't practice any other virtue with consistency. If you don't have courage, how can you practice hope? I mean, it's hard to have hope without courage. And any of the behaviors we do take courage. Sometimes it just takes courage to get up in the morning. Interesting, the origins of courage come from the meaning of heart. Cor means heart. And I don't know how to say it, these words, but atatica meaning age. But gradually, they took heart out. I mean, they took age out, and just in the 1300s, they defined it as speaking one's mind by telling all one's heart. Now, that sounds sort of feminine, doesn't it? So, guess what happened? In 1490, they went to the quality of mind which shows itself in facing danger without fear or shrinking, bravery, boldness, or valor. And instead of speaking one's heart, it became a much more masculine orientation to having a behavior. And it was more of a quality of mind revealed in the absence of fear. This kind of reminds me of resilience, which is my number one thing to do research on, in that resilience used to be considered invulnerability, but we know that nobody's invulnerable. And it's being able to stand up to those vulnerabilities. So now we have the quality of being brave, the ability to face danger, difficulty, uncertainty, or pain without being overcome by fear, and that's the biggest part, or being deflected from a chosen course of action. And sometimes we have the fear, but we're just not overcome by it. But as long as we continue on our course of action. Aristotle looked at courage as the medium. On one end, we have cowardice, and on the other end, we have rashness, where people, and I work with a lot of high-risk youth who go out there and they do very rash things, which we might think are courageous. I wouldn't do them, but they're not courage. It's a mixture of fear and confidence that involves feeling both in the right way, at the right time, and regarding the right things. And the person that comes to mind when I think about this, just automatically, is the lady in Arkansas when they had the shooting at Jonesboro. And I don't know if you remember, but there was one of the teachers, she automatically stepped in front of the student and was killed, and saved that student's life. And I think about that a lot because I'm sure she was afraid, but she felt the right way at the right time and did the right thing. And she just automatically stepped out and did that. Anyway, I work a lot with school counselors. I direct the counseling program at Texas Christian University. And I also work a lot with older adults because a lot of people in my classes are middle-aged to older adults who have gone back to school. And so I decided, and Chris decided to do a survey of people regarding how they felt about courage. So we have so far collected, I intend to collect about 1,000 of these, so we're kind of at the beginning stages. We've collected 313 surveys from 313 individuals. And we're asking them, what is courage? And give an example of courage, and then how would you increase courage? And for the younger ones, we didn't ask them as much about increasing courage, but we did as we got into the upper teens. So we have a pretty good split as far as females and males. If you'll notice, though, we have a whole lot more between the ages of 10 and 30 than we do on the outskirts. Sort of looks like the mean. Okay, I'm going to go through this really fast, but I want to just kind of give you an example of how we're going to do it. Just age 6, almost all these kids said it means to help or to be brave. Examples were like community helpers, and I'm going to give you some extras of these. Santa, he's brave because he comes down the chimney. That's exactly why he's brave. They are relatives and friends in the military. So, of course, and we're hearing all the time about what firefighters did and the policemen did, and so they're really into that right now. And that's all they think about. At ages 8 and 9, oops, I've got the hand, sorry about that, sorry. I feel a lot better using overheads since I use overheads. I was feeling kind of bad that I didn't put mine on slides. The actions, and I divide them into people versus actions. The actions of 6-year-olds were fighting fires, catching bad people, killing animals like bears, or not being afraid of dying, which is kind of interesting that they put that in there. And I'm not sure they would have done it had it not been for 9/11. Definition of courage for 7-year-olds, you're going to see very similar things: brave, helpful, fighting outside forces. You'll see that in a minute. They're not afraid. Again, Santa ranks right up there. And but then they get into, and I think you see this developmental stage. They get into fictional characters like Harry Potter. And also teachers became a real important part of courage. Which, I mean, if you've been a teacher, you know it does take courage. Okay, of the 7-year-olds, again, they have some very interesting actions. And I just put these like this, but the daring actions included riding a jet ski, jumping out a window, climbing a mountain, fighting a tiger. The heroic, I just divided up. Heroic actions were catching bad people, Santa coming down the chimney, and fighting evil forces. I mean, they give a lot of credit to Santa, so you got to have to hand it to them. Another one was helping, and I think that it's interesting as they got older and older, more ways of helping became evident. 8 and 9-year-olds, they define courage as brave, strong, fight outside forces, they're not scared. Examples were like the knight in shining armor, I'm still looking for that guy, family members, friends, and then actions of the self. And the reason I have an asterisk is it's the first time that self becomes involved in that. And let me kind of give you some examples of that. One is to get on a stage and sing. And I guess some of these kids have had some of these experiences. Going into a haunted house, opening a closet and going in. You can just see these kids answering these questions. Riding a roller coaster. Riding a roller coaster was a very popular theme. Not crying. Listening. Trusting God. This is the first time any spiritual element has come up. Helping. Fighting bullies. It's also the first time bullies come up, and that was really important to me because I think at all schools, but bullies are becoming a real issue for kids. It also got away from the national part down to the parts that are impacting them right at home, right in their personal lives. For 10-year-olds, they believe that you stand up for yourself or for someone else. That's what being courageous is. Being brave, being strong, belief in oneself, and self-esteem issues, and I should have put an asterisk about this, was another big issue. Examples, again, were self, family members, community helpers, others their age. which is the first time they start talking about their own peers. Once again, fighting and confronting bullies. Now these are much more dignified and much more mature for kids as they got older. And it amazed me what 10-year-olds would say, like loving someone. Controlling my anger, one of the kids said. Looking under your bed to see if someone's there. And I've had to do that myself as an adult. So, riding a roller coaster again. Telling what you feel. You know, it's pretty neat for a kid to say that. Admitting wrongdoing. Making things better. And I thought, what a great altruistic thought. Helping. Okay, definitions of courage for 11-year-olds. These kids said they're not scared. You believe in yourself. We're back to that self-esteem issue, and I think that they're telling us what they need. You face your fears, doing something when you're scared. You stand up for yourself and others, and you have strength. Regarding self, they have self, you have family members, they have role models. Let me just tell you what they said about self, though, for 11-year-olds. One was getting in front of the class and reading out loud. I didn't write all of the self ones down. Climbing a mountain, singing in front of 1,000 people, a man jumping out of a plane, mom facing a dog that bit her. Daring actions included admitting wrongdoing. They also got into the Wizard of Oz. I had 2 different people who said Dorothy and the Lion, which I thought was pretty cool. And then Amelia Earhart. Chris, who couldn't be here today, she would have gotten off on the lion part. We would have never been through. She really gets into that part. And then they started talking about third persons, like just give me examples. Someone who does this, someone who does that. Sort of a projective approach. Standing up to a bully, again, is another important part. Taking daring actions. Saying no to drugs. You can tell what time, where kids are starting. I mean, you can almost see the temptations and problems that are hitting kids. They even talked about different role models that influence them. For 12-year-olds, they talked about not giving up. Facing obstacles, standing up for yourself and others, doing the right thing, doing good. And I thought it was important that they felt like doing the right thing was, I mean, even today I think about that a lot. What is the right thing to do? And kids are already struggling with that. Examples they gave were having to do with themselves, with their friends, with community helpers, and with animals. The actions, okay, that's just debating behaviors, but the actual actions they would take, including risking one's life, helping or giving to someone, daring actions, and some of the daring actions were being around animals that were scary, and some of them, I guess, were scared of dogs and things like that, but several of them said that. Singing a solo or performing in a play. It's interesting how very early, you already started seeing, back in the 8-year-olds, problems with standing in front of an audience. Role models. And one of the persons that wrote in this, one of the children said, seeing another read and not giving up. And she talked about a friend of hers who couldn't read, who kept trying all the time, and she'd come into her room and she'd see her trying to read. And I thought that was really neat that she gave her that element of courage. A cat and a dog just facing each other rather than the cat running or the dog running. In our case, it's the dog that runs. Self, not doing something if someone gets mad at you. And then one of them was a boy being shot, and the kid carrying on after that. Okay. Well, these are supposed to be, let me see, I'm sorry. let me go to the actions of 13-year-olds. One are, again, back to those daring actions that kids often take. Self-actions. And they talked about saying when you're wrong, which I thought was interesting, that they thought that was an important time. Running in a race. Telling the teacher someone brought a gun. And we're at 13-year-olds, so we're in middle school. Eating something you never tried before. Performing on stage, again, and keep going despite obstacles, which is pretty much the definition. They also talked about heroic actions, like going into a burning building to save someone, soldiers, running for president, which in the United States is a heroic action, save someone from drowning. Several people talked about that. Standing up to bullies, standing up or doing what's right, staying true to God, which was one of the first times they talked about. This is the second time we've talked about religious elements, but they started talking about their own beliefs. Going on when someone dies. And a lot of these kids in this middle school, and I don't know which one wrote this, or there were several who talked about dying, but they had already had a couple of grief groups because different parents had died. Ages 14 to 15, the definition of courage was brave. They have internal qualities like faith. And see, we're getting into these higher level thinking skills. Mental strength, trust, a belief in oneself. It's a state of mind. For some of them felt like, yes, yes, you're not raising your hand, got it, 5 minutes. Doing the right thing despite fear and going against the unknown, which is really, really good. Examples included just doing certain things, like daring things. Third persons, I'm not going to stay on that one, but let's go to the next one. Jumping out of an airplane, skydiving, those were daring actions. But heroic actions got a little bit more mature and a lot more personal for them. Going to war, rescuing someone who's drowning, standing up to others as a Christian, getting someone out of the way of a car, saving someone from a burning building, a policeman saving lives, getting on a plane after September 11th. Self things were handling the death of a loved one, standing up to bullies, jumping a 15-foot gap on my bike, asking someone out on a date. I thought that was really good. Walking into a dark basement for the first time, taking courage when you're losing in soccer, and doing a 5-foot drop on my skateboard. And then confronting a friend when wrongdoing, which is really hard. All right, definitions of courage, 20 to 29-year-olds. They talked about taking risks, doing what you feel you're strong about, doing what others won't or wouldn't do, facing difficult times and solutions, and facing your fears or overcoming them. Their role models became much more personal. And one talked about a friend who was paralyzed but kept trying. They talked about a 10-year-old cousin who was afraid to ride an escalator but did it anyway. And then they talked about Frankel surviving the Holocaust, which I thought was great. Daring activities were very similar. Also standing up to bullies and heroic deeds. Once again, running for president was right up there again. Actions, just for on 20 to 29-year-olds, the self things were confronting a friend, getting up every day and facing grief, which I thought was really said a lot. Answering a question in class, that became much more prevalent an answer as it got older. It seemed to be harder for the college-age kids to do those things. Saying when you're wrong, going on a mission trip, and speaking in front of people. making a job change. Okay, I'm going to go through these pretty quick on the last part. Definitions of courage, facing fear and challenges, standing on what you believe in, internal qualities, which encompass more than just courage. Moving against obstacles, doing things for the benefit of others, which I thought was really great. Their examples were also things of self, older persons, and children. Okay, definitions of courage. Some of y'all, if you don't have a handout, you can email me and I'll send you the handout. Definitions of courage on 40 to 49-year-olds. And this gets much more into the spiritual aspects and much more internal qualities. So you've gone from fighting bullies to these type of things. Standing up for your beliefs, facing fears, and this is back to the same thing, those internal qualities again of independence, dependence, interdependence. It reminds me much of what Dr. Zander was talking about and what we heard this morning, that it takes a lot of courage to depend and be independent. Okay. Let me give you just the last part. I'm going to tell you what the last people said. Definitions of courage were dealing with challenges, obstacles, and adversities. Disregarding yourself, which I thought was really interesting because not a lot of them got into getting rid of yourself until they got older. Doing good things and back to those internal factors. Just for your benefit, if you look at the 60 to 80-year-olds on your handout, most of the people that they named as role models were biblical models. They talked about David and Samuel and all the different, Stephen, Moses, Gideon. They named a whole lot of examples that way, but they also talked about the Wright brothers, President Bush, returning to the Philippines after World War II, which I thought was it really hits their part. One other thing that I want to state, and then I'll just tell you real quick about, the one thing that was interesting is that doing things became more of a part of the definition as kids got older. And if you see, it starts off, but by 10 and 11, but by 12, 48% of them were talking about doing something. And it wasn't just being somebody, it was doing something. The last part that I wanted to share with you were suggestions that they talked about on building courage. One was to build a relationship and to stand by people and support them. Encourage means to bestow with courage. I don't know if you can actually bestow somebody with courage, but I think that's an interesting definition. To me, that implies support. Establishing a friendship, mutually supporting one another, helping people feel safe, and acknowledging their courage. And we don't do that very much with kids, which is unfortunate. Increasing self-esteem, which you saw some of the kids talk about that. Normalizing fears, praising accomplishments, providing just enough support so they'll continue, helping them to know who they are, and letting them know you have faith in them. I think the other part of that was accepting what you can't change. Okay. You have any questions? You have any questions, Steve? No.
Any questions out there?
No questions?
You speak of courage as a private organization.
Very.
In terms of the relational aspect as opposed to oneself, and how that was seen as courage with the ages, as opposed to relation in terms of interacting outside of oneself.
That's a very good point. I think that at the beginning, they look at outside forces. But as they got older, they looked at internal forces and inner strengths. In fact, that became increasingly more and more as they got into the older ages. I don't feel really comfortable talking about the older people because I'm sort of lacking enough population to be totally sure about what they would say. But you're right. I think that at the beginning it's Santa, Dad, it's those kind of things. One of the examples somebody gave me that when they got into about the 10-year-old area was hitting my dad so he wouldn't beat up my mom. And then I thought, whoa, we really are getting into courage. That's, to me, in my definition of courage. Almost all, I think that looking at what they gave us, role models was one of the number one things that we need to provide. Yes?
I've got the sense, watching television and whatnot, that God is sort of a more acceptable word in the States than it is here. Belief in God may be a little bit more common or whatever. Your sample, were they Christian school children, or were they just kids from the general population?
Just from the general population. But I'm from Texas, so we consider the Bible Belt. Yeah, and we have a lot of Christians down there, and lots of Baptists and Church of Christ, and a lot of Protestants. So there is a lot more. We have a lot of diversity down there, but we have a lot of African Americans and Hispanics. But Hispanics mostly are Catholic, and a lot of the African Americans are Baptists. So, but there's a church in every corner. Well, you won't, yeah, and I don't think you would have seen that before 9/11. You see, I don't think you'd have seen all the firemen and policemen as much. But now you turn on the news, see, and every time you turn on the news, you see something about a fireman or policeman or somebody getting an award because it's much more noted now. Mm-hmm. Well, we're always talking about the war in Afghanistan, and a lot of our kids' parents are going, or they're being called up, so it is an issue for them right now.
Yeah, and the other thing about religion is that I think it is definitely regional, so just even with the elderly population we surveyed, I was really, being from the Northeast and now living in the Northwest, really stressed that they were all biblical.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that would be the case.
Other than the Northeast? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or in the Northwest. So I'm just curious, are you going to be working within other regions?
Oh yes, I hope to. I would like to get 1,000 people from different regions. I'd like to have I'd like to get 1,000 just from my region and to represent the area around Texas. But and I'm from Dallas-Fort Worth area, so there's quite a few people there to survey. But I would love to do that. In fact, Chris has a lot of contacts in East Texas. I mean, the eastern United States, and so I'm hoping that she will help me get those people. But you're right. I think it is real different. And Fort Worth, Dallas area is really different.
Well, if you plan on any future research, or perhaps rather than have age groupings, by virtual age, that you be on some scale of the development of their faith. And how that might take.
That'd be good. That'd be a very good. I was more curious. I guess my only thought about the older people was that as older people get older, they start thinking about things like that more than. That's why so many churches are made up of older people. We don't have as many younger people coming. But there's something about getting closer to dying that you start, or some people do start thinking about that. But I like your idea.
Just have one more question. The question is.
But I like your idea.
What was the question you asked?
I asked, what is courage?
What is courage?
What is courage? Give me an example of courage, and how do you raise courage? And then I asked them for their age and gender. I didn't ask about ethnicity. Age and gender. Oh, give me an example of courage. I only asked 3 questions. I asked, what is courage? Oh, yes. Give me an example of courage, and how do you raise courage? How do you increase courage in others? I think that was the way it was phrased. How do you increase courage in others? Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments, too, because they kind of make me think about other things I need to do. So it's good. That was the one I just